A Connecticut judge is ordering a new primary, saying that there was a massive amount of fraud in the election for mayor. You can see a screenshot of this photo. At 5:42 a.m., this individual is dropping off multiple illegal absentee ballots into a ballot box. And this is a Democrat judge. This is in Connecticut, and it is in the Bridgeport Democrat mayoral race. So the Democrats are competing amongst Democrats, and there's just a whole throng of fraudulent ballots being shoved into the ballot drop boxes. Now we're going to go through this because the judge, William Clark, did issue a new order saying that a new election must be held. And I want to read through this, and it's pretty juicy. There is a lot of findings of facts that say exactly what happened, that these people were corrupted in the election process. And it is a clear example of the type of things that we all observed back in 2020. But this one is getting some attention because the judge actually ordered a new trial on it, or a new election on it. And so let's go through the backstory before we get into the opinion. You can see that the Gateway Pundit reported previously that mayoral candidate John Gomez and his campaign, they released a damning video saying that when they were running in the Democratic primary, there was a ton of fraud. The video was on Gomez's Facebook page. It shows a woman dropping off stacks of illegal ballots in the absentee ballot box at the Bridgeport Government Center. The campaign was able to identify the woman as Wanda Gatgeter Pataky. And guess who she is? The vice chairwoman of the Democratic town clerk, and she's a vocal supporter of the incumbent mayor. He's seeking re-election. So the Gomez campaign says that it shows her dropping off stacks of absentee ballots ahead of the September 12th primary, saying that this is an undeniable act of voter suppression and a huge civil rights violation, and we've got to restore honesty to this. So let's watch this video.
I got your back, Mayor.
That's her. Wanda. She comes walking in. Multiple illegal absentee ballots you can see in her hand. Walking across with a big old bag. Looks like she still has her name tag on. 5:42 a.m., multiple illegal absentee ballots being deposited into the ballot box. Walking away. And back again with another stack. 5:43. $6.38. Another day. What's that stack right there? Looks like a whole stack. Second drop. Third drop. Looking around. Right there. September 5th. She preps for another deposit. Got a stack. Walking out the door. This time she sends an employee to make a fourth deposit. So this guy's gonna go drop them in. She's gonna hold the door open. Hey, can you go drop these off? I've been doing a lot of it lately. Multiple illegal absentee ballots being deposited into the ballot box. Walking back inside. Three tied to the Joe Bridgeport mayoral campaign recommended for criminal charges. Nearly 4 years after the Hearst investigation into the alleged misuse of the absentee ballots in the contentious Bridgeport Democratic mayor that was narrowly won by Mayor Joe Ganim, state election officials have recommended possible criminal violations by 3 people aligned with the mayor's campaign, including a member of the city council and the chief state's attorney. Election stolen, voter fraud in Connecticut. So we're going to see what the judge said about this. Bridgeport police have been confirmed. They're actively investigating this, saying that there could be possible misconduct. And they're also investigating how the video was obtained and also released to the public. Yeah. They said, well, in addition, we're doing an investigation to determine if any possible breach into our security video management system has occurred. They don't want you to see what actually the security footage shows, which is people who work for the government corrupting the government elections. So Bridgeport Police Chief Roderick Porter said the department takes these actions very seriously, and we're going to pursue criminal persecution for people who got our video. Now, we're going to read through the court proceeding here in a second, but this is over from Behezy Tweets, who's doing great work on this. Says a Democrat election clerk gives bombshell testimony admitting she has not been following the law on mail-in ballots. And there's just all sorts of problems on this. So this is from the Gateway Pundit. Now, Judge Clark is this guy right here. Judge William Clark presided over a hearing in Bridgeport in Superior Court on September 25th. He issued a ruling on Wednesday that we're going to read, overturning the results of the mayoral primary, and he ordered a new election because the thing was so corrupted. Overturning the outcome. The video and other evidence is what did it. Now, let's read through the memo together so we can see what happened. Now, there's a lot that we're going to fast forward through because it's a very technical memo, but this is coming in this case of John Gomez versus Charles Clemens and the town clerk. So the person who lost the election is suing for a new election and being successful. Coming from the state of Connecticut at Bridgeport. Here, it says the original complaint was filed by John Gomez challenging the election. Also, the candidate of mayor, secretary of state, registrar of voters, and the clerk. Now, while some did not formally appear, everybody else appeared, and we had a number of various status conferences and proceedings. Now, they are also challenging various parts of the law for a couple different components, and there was an amended complaint that came down at some point. Now, they've presented full evidence here and witnesses before the court, and so the judge is going to say, at this point, we have had everything on the record, parties submitted their hearing briefs, and these are the findings of facts. They're going to give us some discussion, and a lot of this, as you can see, is just going to be rules. So a lot of quotations, case law being cited here. We're going to skip forward through all of that. The court has proposed findings of facts and considered the proposed findings of facts in various forms. A lot of rules. You see all of these quotations are rules. This is the rules section. So we're going to get through the rules and then to the analysis, talking about Dropbox rules and other things. Now, the judge says that with all of this applicable law that has been laid out, pages and pages, it's important to establish the facts of this case that the governing law is to be applied to. So we know what the issue is, bad election. All of the rules are what is followed, what we just covered. Now let's apply the facts to the rules to see what the analysis gives us. A section of findings of fact is appropriate. Here's what the judge says. We held a Democratic primary nomination September 12th. We know who the candidates were. Gomez, Ganim. Gomez was the challenger. The results of the election were close. 4,200 to 3,900. Very close. Margin of victory, 251 votes. Undisputed reports, they say that Ganim, the victor, got 2,648 votes on, quote, the machines and 1,500 absentee ballots. Gomez got 3,100 votes on machines and 861 absentee ballots. We know more about how this election was administered. They give us some of the rules about what the law says. They tell us how a person may request an absentee ballot, the do's and don'ts for this process, and if a person takes out more than 5 applications, what the town clerk does. Members of the town clerk review and process the applications. There's stamps that go on, and in this town, there were approximately 5,000 applications for the ballots. Now, this woman we saw in the video, Wanda Geeter Patake, is a supporter of Mr. Ganim, the man who's the incumbent already in charge. And she helps leadership and held leadership titles within the Democratic Town Committee and her local voting district. As a town committee member, she voted in favor of Ganim, and that came from a transcript from some depot. She was active in his campaign and those of other endorsed candidates acting as a district leader. Now, she did not register as an absentee ballot distributor, as confirmed by the lack of her name on any forms that we tried to search. In other words, she wasn't supposed to be collecting these ballots. Her name does appear as the individual who assisted with over 300 applications based on her name and signature appearing on the forms and evidence. So she did assist, apparently. Now, a qualified voter can do some things, and they give us some warnings. They explain what's on the outside of the application, how it works through the mail. It says you may have someone with you help if you're ill or physically disabled, you can use this process. Now, when you have absentee ballots, they are tracked by voting district. Not all ballots sent out are returned. We know that 4,300 were sent out and 2,600 were returned. When they're returned in person, you mark them with a P. When they're supervised voting, you mark them with an S, and so on. Now, the Bridgeport Police maintains cameras that record activities at drop box locations, and they produced videos on 4 drop boxes over a 21-day period where the absentee ballots were cast. The videos are time date and time stamped. Now, based on a video compilation that was edited by Gomez, the plaintiff, from the hard drives, 420 discrete approaches were made to the 4 drop boxes by individuals during the relevant period. Now, we don't know if those are all bad. Video clips edited from the plaintiffs and also entered into evidence also show individuals approaching and dropping off more than one envelope, like a big stack of them. Video clips from the drop boxes show several people dropping multiple ballots off during a single approach. And Pataky, Wanda, was asked about the video clips and asserted her privilege. You're dropping off multiple ballots. You're not supposed to be doing this stuff. So can you please explain? She says, no, I'm invoking my right to remain silent. Also asked about her work on the campaign. Don't you work for the incumbent mayor too? Who's like in this election? Asked about whether she took custody of the absentee ballots. Again, she's invoking. Now, she did confirm that she works for the city. Her duty is a reception desk, and she agreed that the video clips did show her behind the desk. She's presently on administrative leave. And somebody else named Anita Martinez, she testified and confirmed that she's a candidate for city council and on the same slate with Mr. Ganim, and that Ganim supports her. So we have a new player enters the game. Ms. Martinez is also a member of DTC and active politically. She's also in favor of and endorses Ganim, resides in his district. Martinez, another co-conspirator, also invokes, doesn't want to answer any questions about her criminality. So based on video evidence and testimonial evidence from Wanda, Martinez, Josie Bartlett, and Mr. Ganim, including the court making adverse inferences against Wanda and Martinez, and the court's own observation of Wanda and Martinez in person while sitting on the witness stand, the court concludes that Ms. Geeter Pataky Wanda and Ms. Martinez appear multiple times in the video clips that were accepted into evidence. So the judge says, look, I listened to them, I watched them here, I watched the clips, I'm making a finding of fact that they were them. Ms. Martinez made 5 separate drops. Wanda directly made, or through another made, 10 separate drops. And they give us all here. On this location, Martinez moved her arm 10 times. At this time, 3 stacks of absentee ballots. Look at all these, okay? Another one. It's so 15 times between the 2 of them. 10 arm drops. A man in his truck deposited a stack of ballots. 3 arm motions. How many per motion? I don't know. Can you get 10 in there at a time? At this one, handed several absentee ballots to a man at his desk. In a car, handed another set of ballots. 2 sets on this date. Walked out and a woman dropped them off at Broad Street. Here's another. Look at all. I mean, it's all of them, okay? 5 arm motions here. 2 arm motions here. 4 more groups of ballots. 4 arm motions on September 6th. 3 ballots at Broad Street. 4 arm motions on Boston Avenue. Somebody with a burgundy sweatshirt dropped ballots off. Clipboard he had on there to look official. This was a stack on her desk. More ballots on Boston Avenue. The video at Lion Terrace is insufficient, so we're not sure about that one. Now, all of these dropped off. Now, these absentee ballots were conveyed to the Democratic Registrar of Voters. So they go into the drop boxes and then they go over to another entity. The ballots were taken to a central counting location and they landed with Patricia Howard and her office. She counts the absentee ballots. So Howard appointed this person, Maurice Nelson, as the ballot moderator, and he's been doing that for a while. The counters for the ballots check the outer envelopes to see if they were stamped by the town clerk. Nelson understood that the signature means the clerk's name, that if the outer envelope does not substantially comply, he said Nelson was trained that the endorsement was as follows. If it was properly endorsed, then he could pull it out. But he says, we do not compare the signature on the inner envelope to the signature on the voter registration card or the absentee ballot application. Okay, so amazing. 0 signature verification on those. Incredible. So the stamp used by the town clerk's office in this primary did not contain a signature or a facsimile of the town clerk, Mr. Clemens. So they're saying it just, this stamp is not totally in alignment with what the law says it should be. It has to have a signature in the stamp from the town clerk in order for it to be valid. They say, now the court accepts the credible testimony that the stamp with the signature was damaged and inoperable prior to the primary. So they had a stamping problem. And the judge, it seems like he's buying it. Given the totality of the evidence presented and further considering the invalidation and virtually all absentee ballots in this primary, he says, look, if we had just a technicality on that because the stamp was just a little different, he says, I'm going to consider this to be substantial compliance, right? I'm not going to say that the invalid stamp invalidates all the absentee ballots. He says a total of 2,500 absentee ballots came in, only 152 were rejected. Now, other people have been involved in the countings. Okay, a lot of numbers here, outer envelopes, inner envelopes. 1,300 outer envelopes had no stamp and no postmark. And so we're getting some numbers. Let's see if we can tease out what they mean. So he says, basically, the stamp substantially complies with the rule. So he's not going to beat him up over the stamp. Now, as previewed, he says the court is, with all those findings of fact now settled, the court is not inclined to invalidate all of the absentee ballots because of the lack of a signature of facsimile on the stamp. The stamp was just a little different stamp, and I'm not going to kill you over that. The evidence demonstrates that the clerk did have at least a stamp with the facsimile of Mr. Clemens' signature on it. However, they explained credibly that the stamp with the signature was broken or improper. Like, they did have a stamp, but it was broken, so they couldn't use it. So they had to order a new stamp, and for the time being, they just picked a different stamp that didn't have the signature on it. He says, so I still believe that the stamp is inconsequential. There is integrity in the process of handling the ballot. In hindsight, the clerk could have used some other solution, like just sign it by hand, right? Just give it to him and sign it, or get a new stamp on a rush order, fix the old stamp in some other way. I understand you just picked a different stamp and that the stamp didn't, in and of itself, the replacement stamp seems like it was good enough. So if we're going to be hyper technical and just say, well, the signature was off a little bit, I'm not going to do that and reject all the absentee ballots on that because it could impact other races and things. And there's no evidence that other races are bad. It's just this mayor race, this top of the ticket race. Therefore, we rule in favor of the government. Okay, the stamp issue is not the big deal. But this is the other one. Now, violations of absentee ballot rules. He gives us the rules again, and he says here, in this case, the plaintiff admittedly has not presented 251 or more voters to testify about their ballot and whether it was mishandled. So the person trying to get a new election hasn't shown the margin in evidence. But instead, the petitioner, the plaintiff, he relies on video, the one that we watched, submitted into evidence along with other testimonial evidence to establish a substantial statutory violation by partisans, which would result in the voiding of the ballots. So due to the volume of the alleged conduct, they allege that they don't need to prove specific violations. They don't need to go and calculate all 100 and 251 ballots to show that the margin would have been different. All they need to show is saying, Judge, if you accept the totality of the evidence, you can see the scale of the violations. They call the result of the primary election into substantial doubt, which is the legal standard. The government says, no, wait a minute. You can't entertain speculation and conjecture. He says, the judge says, you're right. We can't just base our rulings on conjecture. The burden is high. We defer in great form to the sanctity of the election and the will of the voters. But on the other hand, the parties have not cited and the court has not located any case involving the number of election law violations and the volume of supporting evidence that has been presented here. It's involved many hundreds of applications and ballots, thousands of hours of Dropbox footage, testimony of partisan actors, assertion of privilege against self-incrimination by Wanda and Martinez, and the analysis of ballot numbers, particularly in voting districts linked to these two people who were involved in the case. So he says that's not speculation. In analyzing the evidence in this case, the court concludes that Wanda and Martinez are partisans who supported Ganim, and further concludes that the conduct captured on video, along with the negative inference to be drawn from each of their invocation of a privilege against self-incrimination, that is, the mishandling of the ballots, has been so bad that we can make an inference from that. Therefore, the counting of any ballots that were mishandled in violation of the law was a mistake in the vote count. So any ballots that Wanda, Martinez, and others touched, it's bad. So given the volume of the votes at issue, the miscounting of those statutorily invalid votes leaves this court unable to determine the result of the primary. Can't tell. Now, this is a small-scale election, so it's very easy to see this discrepancy. But in bigger elections that are diverse across the entire country, much harder to identify that fraud and then bring it in front of a judge to invalidate, let's say, an entire state. The evidence, says this judge, demonstrates that Bridgeport has a high concentration of absentee ballot voters. Therefore, of little surprise that many thousands of applications for absentee ballots are taken out and that candidates and partisans seek to get those applications into the hands of voters. Advocacy for a preferred candidate is allowed, but the issue in this case is not the applications or even the push to deliver the votes. The issue is whether that advocacy crossed the line of established laws. Specifically, the question is whether individuals who were not the voter and who were not authorized under the statutes handled the ballots. And based on the videos and the numbers of absentee votes submitted through the drop box, this court finds that those violations did occur. So rather than working as a greeter at City Hall, the videos show numerous clips of Wanda serving as an absentee ballot depositor and facilitator. Perhaps some of that can be explained by her role of directing people who may not know where the drop box is in front of City Hall, but the video depicts a much more consistent level of conduct where Wanda is actively dropping off the ballots in the boxes herself. In some cases, very early in the morning. In evening cases where she should be her work day, after the day is over, handing stacks of ballots to others to drop in the box while she watches or directs them to do so, or coming out and greeting and escorting others to deliver numerous ballots to the boxes. These instances do not appear to be random. They appear to be conscious acts with a partisan purpose that violates the mandatory requirements of how absentee ballots are delivered. Martinez is depicted multiple times doing the same thing. So the court finds it is not a coincidence, obviously, that the districts that Wanda and Martinez reside in are politically connected with or had high absentee ballots. They picked them. Rather, it is a direct consequence of the efforts of Wanda and Martinez to deliver numerous boxes from the drop boxes from the districts where they hold partisan positions. Per other case law, partisan individuals are required to distance themselves from absentee ballots. In this case, there's evidence that they took possession and they harvested ballots and engaged in bulk drops of the ballots into the boxes. The number of ballots at issue, when considering the corroborating evidence of the video and documentary evidence and the calculations, they show a large number of votes in drop boxes, and a large percentage of those votes came from Wanda and Martinez's district. Now, we can infer that there's something to hold against them because they have invoked their right to remain silent, and this is not a criminal case. In a criminal case, you couldn't use that against them. But this is just a civil election case for a new primary, so they definitely can. So Mr. Ganim brings the reliability along with these people of the primary into serious doubt. The lower number of people observed approaching the drop boxes as compared to the higher number of absentee ballots without postmarks or stamps, meaning that they dropped off far more than one ballot when they approached the box. The dates listed on the ballots of when the ballot was filled out by the voter demonstrate a lapse in time in many instances. The court will not make that finding, says the plaintiff considers such lapses to be a violation of the statutory requirement to return the ballot forthwith. And the judge says, we're not going to make that finding. But the court does find that the dates, when linked to the video showing stacks of votes being dropped off, provides credible evidence that the ballots were in fact being harvested in violation of the law. Now, absent any testimony from these two who have invoked, they didn't say that they were authorized to handle these ballots, and because they didn't say that, we're going to infer that they didn't have permission. And so the court concludes that neither Miss Patke, which is Wanda, or Martinez, were authorized to touch any absentee ballots, but they did, and they did so in clear violation of the law. And so in their post-brief hearing and reply, they make much fact, the government says, well, they didn't call a single voter to testify about their specific vote, which is really, one of the more ridiculous standards that they would bring in a lot of the 2020 cases that we covered here. Well, you needed to bring in 10,000 people and show that their votes were rigged, and you need very specific evidence. You can't just aggregate and see a broad pattern of these things in this manner. But this judge has, obviously. Now, the court does not accept the characterization of the evidence. They say, we did call evidence. We called two people. They invoked the voters. They were voters, and they acknowledged their support of the candidate who was already in office. So the negative inference from that testimony is significant. Ganim was surely a voter in the primary, and he testified that he was shocked by what he saw in the video, the actual mayor. The totality of the evidence is sufficient to demonstrate a substantial number of ballots were handled improperly in violation of the law. Now, of the 5,000 absentee ballots, Wanda submitted at least 347 alone, at least. She should not have been doing that unless she was registered. Of her applications, all the ones that she threw in the drop boxes, nearly all of them listed sickness as the reason why they couldn't vote in person. Sickness. Surely some voters may have chronic illnesses, but they can't come and drop it off themselves when they get better? All the ballots linked to Wanda having the same excuse is dubious, specifically and particularly giving her unwillingness to provide any context for what she was doing. In the 3 precincts making up where Wanda lives, Ganim got 61%, 40%, and 55% respectively in absentee ballots. Martinez, Ganim got 29 and 43, but in two other districts, 130 to 2, 135 to 3. Wow, are the numbers. So in this precinct, 136 to 1, or I'm sorry, 136-01, I guess is the precinct. So it's not 2-3 or whatever. Only 94 absentee ballots were counted. 81 had no stamp, or 86%. So high percentages of these ballots look like they're just manufactured. So the number provides no reliability for the primary. Absentee ballots were handled all over the place. Boston Avenue, Broad Street Avenue, 10 separate drops, 5 separate drops here, and they summarize all of that into the video. Now, in contrast, we see here a few other unidentified people, who clearly dropped multiple ballots off into the drop boxes. There is also a considerable amount of video depicting a single person. So one person, one vote. Okay, we've seen them drop off a bunch, but there's also a lot more, one person, one vote. It's significant. That means that there's a much smaller number of people like Wanda who dropped off multiple ballots across the town. Quite simply, the defendants asked this court to ignore the significant mishandling that we saw. There's video flouting the law, and if we do so, it's going to undermine the statutes, and it's going to show that we don't really care about the blatant practice of ballot harvesting. It's going to endorse illegal conduct. And so Mr. Ganim was correct in his testimony, the mayor, where he confirmed that he advised his campaign staffs to follow the do's and don'ts of absentee ballots and don't touch someone's ballots. So the video was shocking to him, the video was shocking to the court, and the video should be shocking to all parties. And so therefore, the judge says, therefore, based on the totality of the evidence presented, the court finds the plaintiff has met the burden of proof, established substantial violations by placing the absentee ballots in the drop boxes. They were not designed to handle the ballots, and therefore serious doubts about the primaries, and the court cannot determine the legitimate result of the primary. Therefore, the judgment shall enter in favor of the defendants against the government, and the court orders a new Democratic Party nomination for mayor, directing the court to certify this decision to the Secretary of the State to tell her to do it again. So the parties are ordered within 10 days to confer with each other in good faith to propose a new way to effectuate this in the city of Bridgeport, including the date for the new primary. Signed by Judge William F. Clark, Superior Court Judge. And that is a good ruling, my friends. And you know what we didn't hear a lot of was enough evidence to change the outcome of the election and all of the other sort of legal traps, the high hurdles, the high burdens that we saw from other judges who didn't want to change the Trump election, right? This guy saw fraud, and a lot of this stuff is the exact same stuff that we saw in various states around the country. People dropping off ballots. We read through a whole FBI report, a whole police report that was then picked up by the FBI from Michigan, where they had whole fraud ballot harvesting operations with people in convenience store, strip mall centers, just gobbling up ballots in full-blown operations. And the FBI looked the other way. Bill Barr said, no, nothing going on, because they were all happy with the outcome because it served their political ends. But this judge, really kind of hard to deny this one. So a very interesting order from Judge Clark, William Clark, ordering a new election in Connecticut. And that's going to be fun to follow. Hopefully, we start to see more evidence and more eyeballs on these mechanics so that when they try some sneaky stuff again in this next election, we'll be able to catch them in the act. And so, of course, we'll continue to cover, my friends. Thank you for liking this video and hitting that subscribe button, and we'll look forward to seeing you on the next one.